Hi, class. We are dealing with 12D today, so our last lesson. Woo! And 12D is dividing the political pie, which basically means redistricting or districting your areas of voters and putting them into groups of voters. Last time we talked about apportionment. That is only the beginning of the practical issues associated with electing representatives. Electing representatives is a major deal, a very, very major deal. There's so many different parts to it, and people want it to be fair most of the time. Redistricting is the process of redrawing political boundaries, and you've probably heard of this before. In fact, I've heard of it so many different times. In particular, I was in Virginia for a while, and they were right in the middle of a bunch of mitigation over how the lines were drawn for each district. And the districts and their boundaries have to be drawn somewhere. You have to put a boundary somewhere so that one representative can represent that district, or however many representatives. But that representative goes to the House, and then they're voting, and therefore the boundaries become pretty important. Redistricting must be done every 10 years after a census because populations shift, they change, and we need to make sure that those population shifts are reflected in the population. So it's kind of a crazy deal. The competitiveness for elections has decreased because districts are drawn to ensure the party of the victor. And this is really bad for democracy. It's not good at all because the winning party in elections shouldn't be predetermined. And in a lot of areas right now it is, because whoever is in charge in those at that 10-year section or 10-year time, they're able to redraw it the way that they want to. And there are things that you can do to ensure that one person always, or one party always wins, like the Republican Party always wins or the Democratic Party always wins. And you can do that very easily just by where the districts are drawn. You can we'll explain it in a minute. Redistricting has always been politically charged, but most political observers agree that it has become even more contentious in recent years. A lot of mitigations are going on all over the country because of this redistricting, even as we speak. So the question to ask is there any evidence that redistricting is creating problems for our democracy? And if you find that it is, then people need to take charge and go take care of this problem if they feel that it is creating problems for our democracy. The little statement here is kind of funny. If the opposite of pro is con, what's the opposite of progress? And that's Congress. And that's just a joke that was circulating after public approval of Congress reached record lows. If the opposite of pro is con, what's the opposite of progress? So it's just kind of a joke. But it's true. It's very interesting how this redistricting happens. And in fact, we've come about with the term gerrymandering. It is the drawing of district boundaries so as to serve the political interests of the politician in charge of the drawing process. So oddly enough, the term originated in 1812 when Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry created a district that critics ridiculed as having the same shape as a salamander, or they could see it in the redistricting that he set up. So there's a famous political cartoon attached to the label gerrymander, and it's been used ever since. And so they call this gerrymandering. If you look at this little picture, I found it on the internet. You can look it up. But this is the salamander for Massachusetts at the time in 1812. So you can see that they took these districts and they set them up specifically so that his party won, the Democrats won. All districts within a particular state must have been very nearly equal populations. So when they're drawing them, their populations need to be nearly equal. And they also must be contiguous, meaning that every part of the district must be connected to every other part. And that's something that has to occur, that has to happen in order for the redistricting to hold. And in this case, the gerrymandering, they actually kept everything contiguous. Everything's connected, but it's kind of a salamandery looking shape as they set up their districts there. If you were to understand how gerrymandering can affect election outcomes, consider a state that is equal numbers of Democratic and Republican voters, but the Democrats have a majority in the state legislature. So even though everybody in the district is equally represented, there are 50% of them are Democrats, 50% of Republicans, the Democrats have a majority in the state legislature, and therefore at that 10-year mark are in charge of drawing district boundaries. So they all get together, and in that case, the Democrats can draw boundaries that concentrate the Republican voters into one or a few districts instead of setting them out in all the districts equally so that the districts have equal Republicans and equal Democrats in each of the districts. They concentrate the number of Republican voters right in one or a few districts. That way the Republicans win one or a few districts, but that leaves all of the Democrats, because now you have the majority of the Democrats that are spread out amongst the other districts, and they become the majority everywhere else. So the majority of the voters or the representatives that go to the House are coming from these Democrat districts, and they're sending several people to the House to vote as Democrats, and the Democrats are being heavily represented. But in the one or few little districts where all the Republicans were concentrated, then the Republicans are only represented by a minority in the House, whereas the Democrats are represented with a majority in the House. And that's why gerrymandering or setting up the unfair districts can be detrimental, because they're not really representing the citizenry as they should be in an equal manner as it's set up. Instead, it's concentrating the representation on one side, one political side. So if you look at this little question, consider a state that has 6 House seats and elects its 6 representatives in 6 districts. So they have 6 House seats to send in these districts. So District 1 through District 6 with 1 million people each. So each of them have 1 million people. Assume that half of the voters are Democrats and half are Republicans, and they always vote on party lines. So you can always guarantee that half of those people in the district, those 1 million people in each of the 6 districts, vote along party lines. They vote Democrat and half vote Republican. If district boundaries were drawn randomly, what would be the most likely distribution of the 6 House seats? So what would you expect? Well, the likely outcome would be that the House representation would reflect the voter representation. So that means the 6 House seats would be equally divided, evenly, so that 3 of the House seats were Republican representatives and 3 were Democrat. And that's what you would expect to see. Now, suppose that somehow the legislature could draw the boundaries of District 1 so that all of its 1 million people were Democrats. If the remaining population were randomly distributed among the other 5 districts, what would be the most likely distribution of the 6 House seats? So since District 1, that first district, would consist of those 1 million Democrats and no Republicans whatsoever, the district would elect a Democrat, right? So that would be heavily, all 1 million Democrat voters would 100% vote in a Democrat representative. Then the remaining 5 districts, so you have 5 other districts out there, then have an overall population of 3 million Republicans and 2 million Democrats. So 3 million Republicans, 2 million Democrats. So what does that do? Well, if the districts were drawn so that the populations would reflect this, the Democrats would have a 3-2 margin in every one of those 5 districts, and therefore the Republicans would win all 5 of the districts. And the end result, despite having equal numbers of Democratic and Republican voters, the state would end up with 5 Republican representatives and only 1 Democratic representative. And that's the power of redistribution or of gerrymandering. You could have the House representatives not really reflecting the situation with the real citizenry and how they view or what their views are. All right. I have a little problem here that's like what's on the homework, and I have 5 minutes until I need to stop the video. So we'll see what we can get done with it. Otherwise, we'll stop it and move on to a second video to finish the rest of the lesson. So this says the 2010 census led to the loss of 2 House seats in State A and State B, the loss of 1 House seat in State C, the gain of 2 House seats in State D, and the gain of 4 House seats in State E. Consider the following approximate vote counts for all House districts in these states in 2010 before redistricting, and then in 2012 after redistricting. So understand that 2010 went along and everything was being done with whatever the districting was prior to 2012, and then 2012 they redistricted the people and the homeowners. So the figure is in thousands of votes. Votes for other parties are neglected. So find the percentages of votes for Republican and Democratic House candidates in 2010 and 2012. So in 2010, actually, I really wish I had like a little, can I use that? So maybe this is 2010. Oh, all right. And then this is 2012. So what we're going to do is to work with those percentages of Republican and House votes. All right. So what we'll do first is we need to get a total. So 2025 and 1,888 we're voting. Those are the votes that we got in 2010, and that total is 3,913. Okay, so then we're going to take 2,025, and that's how many Republican votes came in out of the total 3,913. And let's see, we're going to do this with 2010. I'm going to write it up here where we have a little bit more room. So Republican and Democrat, and then in 2012, Republican and Democrat voting percentages. So 2,025 divided by 3,913 is 51.8%. So that's 51.8%. Okay. And then we'll have to do for the Democrats in 2010, they were 1,888 divided by 3,913. And that's 48.2%. Hopefully you can tell that's one. All right, so that's 2010. Oh, whoops. I meant to write that 48.2% right there. And you know what? I still haven't figured out how to do an eraser here. It's unfortunate, but it's true. All right, so the next one, the green there, is 2012. And so we have to find a total of votes. So 2,720 Republican votes plus 2,791 Democratic votes is going to be 5,511 total votes. And then the percentage that voted Republican would be 2720 out of 5,511. And that is 49.4%, which is, I'm going to have to change this because I did my table a little bit differently than I originally at first, but then I fixed it. Okay, so 49.4%, hopefully you can read that. And then the Democratic totals, let's see, we have 2791 divided by our total 5,511, so our percentage 2791 divided by 5,511 is 50.6%. Alrighty, so that's 50.6% Democrat. Those are our percentages of votes. Now, find the percentage of House seats that were won by Republican and Democratic candidates. So we're going to do 2010 again. So we have Republican, Democrat, and then 2012 Republican and Democrat. Let's get our totals. So these are just the votes over here, or the seats that were there. So we had a total of 17 in 2010. So 11 were Republican and 6 were Democrat. So what percentage is 11 of those 17 seats? And that's 64.7. And then Democrat would be 6 divided 17, 35.3. All right, percent. And then our other total was 16. 4 plus 12 is 16, so 12 over 16 and 4 over 16. 12 divided 16 is 75%. And 4 divided by 16 is a fourth, so 25%. All right, so those are our totals. Now, it says explain whether the distributions of votes reflect the distributions of House seats. So we have 64.7 in 2010 House seats belong to the Republicans, whereas only 51.8% of the votes were cast for Republicans. Likewise, Democrats, 35.3% of the House seats, whereas 48.3% of the votes were cast for Democrats. So those numbers don't really match up. And so does it go with, 75% of the House seats were owned by Republicans in 2012, where only 49.4 votes were cast for Republicans, and then 50.6 votes were cast for Democrats, whereas the seats that they had in the House were 25%. So those numbers are way off. So what we would say is the votes do not reflect the distribution of House seats. And I don't know that I need to write this down. Oh, I've gone way over. I'm going to stop this here and then pick it up in a second, and we'll talk about it in the next video. So go ahead and watch the next video.